welcome Senator Bell and Senator Nielsen. Thank you. And please present as you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. On behalf of Senator Nielsen and myself, we are requesting this audit. The Accreditation Commission for Community Colleges is the only entity in California that accredits community colleges. They provide them with a monopoly, and California community colleges with no other options to receive their accreditation, so they have to go through this accreditation commission. Any community colleges that loses its accreditation as a result of this group loses access to federal and state funding for their students. The stakes are high and the commission's power is absolute. Unfortunately for our community colleges, it appears this commission has been having problems with their directions and authority, and we have many numerous examples. Senator Nielsen and I believe is imperative that the commission be audited by our state auditor. We have many questions only our state auditor can find answers for, and we urge your audit approval. And I'd like to point out that we since the last meeting, at your direction, we accommodated the reduction of the audit expenditures. Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Senator Nielsen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. This request for audit is applicable to the situations related to all community colleges in California to ensure fair and equal treatment for all community colleges in California. The ACCJC is a non-state agency. It doesn't have accountability standards, or rather they are unrestrained and defined by themselves. The practices are supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. But by the Commission's own admission, it uses self-evaluation and assessments to hold itself accountable. I would argue that is not acceptable. That was kind of one of the first red flags, coupled with the complaints that we'd received, Senator Bell and I, throughout California from various community colleges. The director of the accreditation for the Department of Education has taken action against this commission based on their lack of transparency, not having clear and effective controls against conflicts of interest. They have found that there's a bias and faulty process in selecting commissioners. And most concerning to me is noncompliance with the United States Department of Education regulations and the manipulation of outdated regulations by ACCJC attorneys to prevent public disclosure of documents. This gave credence to our concerns. There are a number of issues that then gave credence to Senator Bell and mine concerns and credit for our request of this audit. Senator Bell and I met with President Barbara Bino in my office. In all my career, in my thousands of meetings with agency individuals, representatives, secretaries, etc., I have never dealt with a more arrogant, condescending, and dismissive individual in their response to Senator Bell and I. Now, that does not give us comfort that all is well in how they're treating our California community colleges. That attitude reflected in such a senior person raised huge red flags for me. But even more troubling, and we requested a lot of information, Senator Bell and I had previously and formally requested and did in person in this meeting in the office. 3 days after a meeting with these individuals from ACCJC, President Bino released a commission statement, of which I have a copy here, telling commissioner members of the evaluation team to shred confidential documents regarding personal notes, self-evaluation, team reports, committee reports, and evidentiary documents provided by an institution. Shredding of documents. You talk about red flags, ladies and gentlemen. That certainly is one. What have they got to hide? And what have we got to accomplish to ensure that our community colleges, all in California, are fairly treated? And the most important fundamental, and agencies all over government today are out of control in this regard, moving ahead, imposing things on the citizens of California and the agencies of California without statutory or regulatory authority to do it. Every agency does it. And here's an example of one who I argue has exceeded its authority, and we would respectfully request this audit.
Thank you, Senator. At this time, we're going to. Do you have testimony as part of the presentation?
Chair Gray, members of the committee, David Bala Hawkins with the California Community College Independents. We are sponsoring the request. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Madam Auditor, if you would go ahead and present your analysis of the audit request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The senators have asked for an audit of ACCJC, accrediting commission. So basically, the first thing we would do, they've asked us to look at 3 community colleges, two of which have been sanctioned. So we want to make sure we look at least 2 of those, but in total we will look at 3 community colleges. But we're going to look at a variety of things, and I'll step through those relatively quickly. First of all, the accreditation process that the Commission is using. Is it consistent with laws and regulations? Are there policies consistent with specific state requirements related to accreditation? Have those policies changed? And if so, what changes have been made, and what's the fiscal impact on the community colleges of those particular changes? Very important question they've asked us to look at is, does the accreditation process used by the Commission incorporate measures of educational quality? That's an important key component, key element in the whole accreditation process. So they've asked us to look at that. The recommendations and requirements that the Commission has imposed on these specific institutions that we're going to look at, they're asking us whether or not those actually comply with state laws and regulations. Have they the requirements, again, of these community colleges, the actions that they have been required to take, are they consistent with laws and policies with respect to the governance structure in the state of California of our community college system? And then at each of those 3 community colleges, what changes have they had to go through or had to undertake from 2009 through 2013 to address any requirements imposed by ACCJC, the Commission itself? And what costs have the community colleges incurred to be able to comply or to comply with the requirements that have been imposed upon them? They've also asked us, to the extent we possibly can, to determine whether there are trends in the number, percentage, and types of sanctions imposed on community colleges in California, and comparing that to decisions made by other accrediting bodies in other parts of the United States. So our community colleges in California being sanctioned or had requirements that are perhaps more stringent in a different trend or higher percentage than elsewhere in the United States. A couple of other issues, as Senator Nielsen indicated, wanting us to look at retention policies, again, from 2009 to 2013. What are their specific policies for retaining documents, and are they complying with those policies? Also, open meeting laws, both federal and state open meeting laws, they've asked us to determine whether or not, again, the Commission is complying with those. And then the final objective is asking us to look at the use of contractors. So identifying the number, the identity of the contractor, and the purpose of these consultant contracts that ACCJC has entered into, and looking at some of the payments to determine the appropriateness and who is responsible for those payments. So again, in a nutshell, looking at 3 different community colleges, they have specified they would like us to look at 2 that have been sanctioned and look at all these different issues that I identified. The audit's budgeted at about 2,700 hours. It's about 7 months. Again, the reason for that is looking at the 3 different community colleges and the various processes, and in addition to open meetings, retention policies, et cetera.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Do we have any testimony from affected agencies or parties? Okay, please come forward and provide your testimony.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Frank Gornick. I'm the Chancellor of the West Hills Community College District in California and one of 19 accrediting commission members that make decisions about the quality of public education, higher education for two-year colleges in California, Hawaii, American Samoa, Guam, Palau, Micronesia, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the Marshall Islands. With me is Dr. Krista Johns, Vice President of Policy and Research for ACCJC. In preparing for these remarks today, I was forwarded an article that I think would be just appropriate to read a couple paragraphs, but it was in the Monday's Community College Week, which is a national publication, international publication. It goes to community colleges throughout the international community. It's by Paul Bradley, and the title of it is Flexing Their Muscles. And I think it's instructive as to what has occurred with accreditation in the United States. Time was when the country's 7 higher education accrediting bodies were little more than good old boy networks in bow ties, horn-rimmed glasses, and sensible heels. The gatherings of brethren would periodically visit campus for a few days, renew acquaintances, take an inventory of books on libraries, calculate how many professors had doctorates, make sure that there was enough student parking. They'd give a college a stamp of approval and be on their merry way. Seldom were there negative findings or recommendations for improvement. But in today's new age of accountability, assessment, and transparency, the role of accreditors has changed dramatically. In 2013-14 academic year begins, accreditors are ratcheting up the pressure on colleges to boost graduation rates, improve financial stewardship. Accreditors, in turn, are feeling the heat from Washington policymakers who have poured billions of dollars into higher education only to see tuition skyrocket, attainment rates sag, and student debt loads grow in staggering levels. Measuring things such as degrees of faculty members and library holdings are no longer good enough. Accreditors are now demanding evidence of financial stability and student learning. Boards of trustees need to prove that they are providing proper oversight. Institutions have to demonstrate meeting accreditation standards at all times, not just when gearing up for a self-study accreditation visit. Dr. John Roos is quoted in this article. There's been a lot of criticism of higher education over the past few years, and I think that's going to continue, the noted community college scholar indicated. People are questioning whether mom and dad should send their kids to college. All this has been percolating at the top. So much has changed in the past few years as colleges have focused on students and outcomes assessment. Those things were unheard of 25 years ago. It's been happening in all kinds of enterprises, and now it's happening in higher education. As you are aware, California created a statute requiring public community colleges to be accredited by our organization, and that statute lies within your authority as lawmakers. However, the ACCJC's authority to serve as an accreditor for purposes of federal aid and eligibility comes from its approval and recognition by the U.S. Department of Education, authorized by Congress. That approval comes with vigorous review audit processes undertaken at least every 6 years. The ACCJC is undergoing such a review audit currently, and as indicated in the recent USDEA letter to ACCJC concerning the complaints by CFT and others. The ACCG will be required to respond to the noted items and any other concerns from USDEA completed review analysis this fall, in advance of hearing before the USDA's National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality. The results of that review audit and hearing will be made known to ACCJC and to the public shortly within the new year. ACCJC has provided much information about its accreditation practices to the sponsors of this request, Senators Beal and Nielsen, which I hope they have shared with you. Comments? The Senator's letter of August 1st asking for an audit of ACCJC relies heavily on third-party complaint filed by the California Federation of Teachers with the USDEA, much of which mischaracterizes the purpose, intent, and processes of ACCJC. It is important to note that the CFT does not represent the California community colleges or their educational mission. The ACCJC welcomes this opportunity to respond to some of your concerns. First, some current information. The CFT complaint attached to the Joint Legislative Audit Letter was reviewed by the USDEA agency responsible for evaluating us, and the USDEA issued its preliminary findings in an August 13th letter, in which it found only 3 small areas of concern with ACCJC policy and 1 concern with practice. The Department's letter stated that the other concerns and allegations in the 275-page-plus complaint did not demonstrate that ACCJC practices were out of compliance with federal recognition requirements. As noted by the USDA, quote, "They are issues which the staff concluded were either not related to the Secretary's criteria for recognition of accreditors or were found to be compliant within the context of this review," close quote.
So if you can bring your comments to a close and make clear if you're in support or in opposition to the audit request.
Yes. In closing, some, but not all, California public community colleges have difficulty meeting accreditation standards. Some slip backward into noncompliance a few times before stabilizing. They have had years of public funding reductions, large retirements of experienced leadership, confusion over state policies or on governance resulting in broken decision-making systems, a broad mission and lack of sufficient resources to address all student needs equally well, and acrimonious political environments. Their policies and practice may need substantial change. For some colleges, the lapse is temporary, but for others, it signals the possibility of significant collapse in quality or even solvency. ACG shares with legislators concerned about the quality of community college education and success in California. The ACCJC's accreditation process and institutional participation in accreditation maintains quality and promotes improvement. In so doing, the ACCJC serves the interests of California, its students, and communities. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you for your testimony. Is this Ms. Bino with you today?
No.
Is there some reason she's not present and available?
Yes, Mr. Chair, may I address that in one other item? Dr.
Go ahead.
Bino is currently not in this area. She had already arranged a training program for people who are flying in from across our region today, and it would not have been possible for them to move their airline travel and so forth around. I'm the Vice President for Policy and Research, and I do work with policies and the application of policies in our agency. I wanted to especially address the concern raised about the policy related to records and record retention. We are actually bound by federal regulation in the record retention area. We must retain all records that are used in decisions, accreditation decisions, for a minimum of a full cycle of an accreditation of an institution. And that actually is a minimum of 6 years. The agency does that scrupulously, and in all of its audit reviews by the U.S. Department, that has been deeply probed and has been found to be not wanting. The policy that's being discussed is a policy that pertains to the many volunteers who work in our capacity to do evaluations of institutions. They are evaluation teams, commissioners, and others who, by virtue of fulfilling their role, are required to evaluate thousands of pages of material. That material often contains highly confidential information concerning our member institutions. That information has to be carefully managed. So, in addition to the retention of records by our agency, we have to have policies that pertain to these volunteers and how to appropriately deal with this material. And in that capacity, we've had policies and trainings and procedures for years about retaining and not retaining those materials. But recently, we were called upon to have a more specific statement that said, when the information is not needed for you in carrying out your role, you must get rid of that information or submit it back to the agency. And so that is not a reflection on the agency's retention of records. It really is a policy about how to protect the confidential information held temporarily by the volunteers who work with the accreditation when they're doing their process.
Thank you. At this time, do we have any questions from the members of the committee? Selman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe one of the gentlemen here mentioned U.S. Department of Education having oversight over ACCJC, and I believe, Senator Nielsen, you touched on an investigation that was ongoing. Can someone clarify, please, has any information from that come out already, and has it been concluded, and if it has not been, when will it be concluded? And wouldn't it be prudent to wait for that? If someone can clarify that, please.
If I may, the full review audit takes a long time, and that is still underway. There's the anticipation that there would be a preliminary revelation of all of the findings by late fall, with the opportunity by response by the agency prior to, well, roughly in the November time frame. That would then be brought to this rather intense process of NACCJC, this national agency that reviews the findings of the U.S. Department, and then the results are published or made public, usually January, February, somewhere in that. It depends on their timing. There has been a preliminary letter issued by the U.S. Department that was referred to, and that pertains to the complaint that cited many, many areas of regulation that the complainants wanted to have reviewed as a part of this process. And I think in the interest of being speedy, the U.S. Department did already respond, saying that in that context, largely the agency, ACCJC, is in compliance, but there are 4 areas in which there is the need to look at policies. Actually, 3 areas of policy and 1 area of practice related to something called a 2-year rule. That hasn't yet resulted in our response to the department, so that process is all part of this thing I described earlier for the fall.
Thank you.
Just to make sure I understand you correctly, all we have so far is a preliminary letter. The full audit is taking place, but we will have preliminary results in November and then the full results in January. Is that correct?
Yes, the preliminary results will be provided to us, the ACCJC, most likely in early October, with a chance for us to respond within a month after that, and then there's a final report that's presented to this governmental agency at the federal level.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Manser, I would submit this is typical and expected obfuscation and delay. We've focused on some very serious issues that have given what I am familiar in criminal justice as I'd call probable cause. We're simply asking then the next step be taken.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no more questions from the members, we'll go ahead and take any public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the 2 senators, too. Specifically for City College, we're in a great state of emergency and crisis with the accreditation process as it happened. While we are very accommodating to some of the constructive criticisms, recently the Department of Education upheld some of our recommendations where the accreditation process is not only guilty of no transparency and limited accountability, but also conflict of interest with the director, Ms. Bino. So the thing that kills me the most is that we have a treasure here. And it is very special to San Francisco because there's such a diversity represented in the City College, and the path of advancement for many disenfranchised people, whether they be Latino, African American, the homeless, LGBT, transgender. Fortunately, they're adults, so they can't be pulled out of school. And so what we're seeing is a diminishment in the in enrollment. And of course, when the enrollment goes down, then the school gets in even more trouble. And the reason the enrollment is going down is because of the maladroit application of the accreditation process. I'm not going to say the word corrupt, but it is a word that has been thrown around. So this, to me, is a very, very important step. I think my good colleague, Senator Nielsen, and I very seldom agree on issues, but he is 100% right on that issue, and I hope that doesn't hurt him with the constituents if they say I agree with him in Arcadia. But I would really strongly recommend an aye vote on this audit. It really is a matter of life and death for a lot of our young people.
Thank you, Assemblymember Amiano.
Monica Nostroza with the California Federation of Teachers. We support this audit request by Senators Beal and Nielsen and would like to thank both senators for their leadership on this issue of accreditation. As the Senator's audit request letter noted, and as ACCJC itself has mentioned, CFT has been at the forefront of examining the accreditation process. And we have found that the ACCJC, instead of helping to improve the delivery of education, has diverted attention, time, and resources away from the classroom to quote-unquote compliance, much of which has little, if anything, to do with ensuring quality education. There is a tremendous level of skepticism among educators across California that the accreditation climate for California community colleges can be improved without effective oversight, and this is what this audit would do. For this reason, we support this audit as an important opportunity for the legislature to apply careful scrutiny to the accreditation process for our state's two-year institutions. And I would like to add, because the question of CFT's third-party comment to the U.S. Department of Ed has been mentioned, that this audit request actually touches on several issues that are not immediately being looked at by the U.S. Department of Ed, including the fiscal impact on our community colleges. And we think even to the extent that the Department of Ed at the federal level is investigating the commission, we think this is a helpful complement that looks at important issues as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Baker with the California Teachers Association. We also support this audit moving forward. Would like to note there has been a significant lack of transparency as well as lack of access to the public to many of the meetings that have been taking place, and that has had a significant impact on the ability of us to really understand what has been transpiring and what's going on. The fact that the decisions that are made have such a huge impact on the tens of thousands of students that have already been impacted by the fiscal cuts and have not had access to community colleges over the past number of years because of the fiscal crisis. This simply adds to what has already happened. We'd like to encourage this to move forward and ask for your support.
Andrea York on behalf of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. In support of this audit. This audit and the CFT letter represent years of increased concerns by the faculty regarding the ACCJC. We see these costs as basically an unfunded mandate to the colleges that are coming directly out of the classroom. We think it's timely, we think it's important, and we ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, would you like to respond?
Yes, if I may. Two items. One is that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact, and I'm sure the senators would agree, and those who spoke, that what hangs in the balance here is City College of San Francisco. And they have a timeline in which they're focusing to address some things with respect to the accreditation. And the audit's going to be an audit, but we also have the other issues focusing on the campus with respect to Special Trustee Agrella. Moving the college forward to hopefully retain its accreditation. Okay. The other item I would like to say is that other colleges have been on show cause, and they have come off of show cause. So of the 112 colleges that we have, and there's been a reference to that, colleges do make progress, and they are in good standing. They come in and out of that, coming in and out of those standards. So it's not impossible, but this is a separate issue than it's related, but it's a separate issue than what the good work that needs to be moving forward at the college.
Thank you, members. The item before us is item E, 2013-123 in respect to accrediting community colleges. Do we have a motion and a second?
Approval of the request.
Motion from Mr. Sajian, second from Mr. Rendon. Secretary, please call the roll.
Gray.
Aye.
Gray, aye. Ashajian.
Aye.
Ashajian, aye. Atkins. Donnelly. Donnelly, no. Lowenthal. Mansour. Rendon. Rendon, aye. Bell. Bell, aye. Canella. DeSaulnier. Fuller. Galgiani. Jackson. Lara. Aye. Lara, aye.
Okay, thank you, Senator Bell. Senator Nielsen, that item is on call.